Okay, welcome everyone. Maybe we'll just wait uh, just a little bit longer and see if everybody can come over. Okay, I think we can get started. I'm Kim McAllister. I'm a program officer at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, and I'm one of the science officers for the HEAT Research Hub. And for this HEAT Hub session, each presenter is going to have about 6 minutes to present. Please introduce yourself when you begin. We're going to probably do just a few questions after each presentation, and then we'll try to hold the rest until the end, just to make sure everybody gets through. And please use the chat during the presentations to ask questions, or go ahead and raise your hand at the end of the presentation. We are recording this session. Please mute yourself if you're not speaking. And if everyone has not already done so, if you want to put your name affiliation in Zoom to sort of introduce yourselves to everyone else. So with that, I think Chris Jack, I think you're presenting first.
Yeah.
And are you going to present live?
I can do. There is a pre-recording. I don't know what the preference is. I'm happy to do it live.
Yeah, it doesn't matter whichever one you prefer.
Okay, great, thanks. Let me just share screen. Super. Great, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Kim, for the introduction, and greetings, everybody. Thanks for this opportunity to talk about the HEAT Center, which is quite a daunting challenge because it's a big project. You can see all the partners' logos listed at the bottom there. So a lot of partners, a lot of amazing people doing a lot of really interesting work. So trying to talk about it in 6 or 7 minutes is very difficult. But at very high level, so the HEAT Center is the Heat and Health African Transdisciplinary Center. And our focus very simply is on developing data science solutions to mitigate the health impacts of climate change in Africa. Oopsie, there we go. I've tried to put a slide together, take another one to try and explain what the HEAT Center is and what the flow of the work is in the HEAT Center, and hopefully this is useful. So the HEAT Center is divided largely into these 2 research projects. Research Project 1, where the focus is across, generally across Africa, particularly across countries where we can access data. And then Research Project 2, which is focused on urban heat and health outcomes, and there we focused in Johannesburg and Abidjan. And then, of course, there are the pilot projects that we'll be talking, some of them we'll be presenting a little bit later. There's also new projects, such as the HE2AT project, that is adding on an analysis of air quality, and other projects that are building on the HEAT project. So a lot of extra work and extra activities happening. Very broadly, the engine room, if you like, of the HEAT project, and where a huge amount of the effort has been, is in this gray box in the center, the data harmonization process. So a lot of work, even before the HEAT Center started, and then the initial phase of the HEAT Center, is identifying existing health data sets. So, for example, for RP1, the maternal and childhood health IPD data sets, so studies that have been done already, completed, and produced really relevant and valuable data sets related to maternal and childhood health. And then for RP2, looking at cohort studies and drug trial studies that, again, have been completed in the past and where valuable data sets are available. The plan and what we're implementing and learning a lot as we go is to bring all these data sets together, to remap them into a common code book. To do that, we've ended up developing a web-based tool that enables a team to do the remapping of variable names, and then a harmonization process to bring those variables into common units, common sets of categories, and to produce these harmonized data sets. And this really is the engine room, and a huge amount of credit needs to go to the large team that's involved in this. It's hard work, a lot of relationship building with data providers, a lot of work on the data side itself, a lot of learning as we go about how to do this. So this is the engine room. But I'm really pleased to present here to say the engine room is working well, and we're moving towards the right-hand side of the slide, where we're developing the first harmonized data sets for RP1 and RP2. And this will allow us to really push towards the right of this flow, where we're going to be implementing the heat health modeling, again, focused on maternal and childhood health for RP1, and urban heat health outcomes for RP2. Here also begin to integrate a lot of the climate and other environmental data. I'm going to speak a bit about that later, as well as socioeconomic data representing vulnerabilities and exposures. And the ultimate goal, RP1, developing these heat health indicators for maternal and childhood health, and then for RP2, the urban heat health early warning systems that we're moving towards. So this is the big picture, the flow, and the engine room in the middle. So speaking of that engine room, these are complicated figures, but these are the ones that we get excited about. These are the numbers of data sets that are going through the different process for RP1, ranging from initial contacts with data providers, building those relationships, all the discussions and eligibility checks, developing the data transfer agreements, getting them in place, and then beginning the harmonization. And you can see the small number, but at least there are some now of data sets that we have pushed through the harmonization process. And this is changing week by week at the moment. Similarly for Johannesburg, for RP2, similar nice progress over the last few months. And again, huge credit to the team that are driving all of this. And again, for Abidjan, some nice progress happening there. I'm going to talk more about the heat hazard modeling for RP2, partly because that's the bit I'm most involved in and leading. And here it's a really interesting study. We're trying to develop high resolution heat health exposure maps across the different cities. So my dog is snoring. And we have different data sets available. We have very low resolution data sets. You can see on the left there, this is for Abidjan, global data sets representing heat exposure, but at low resolution, consistent through space and time, all the way through to Modus products that are using remote sensing to estimate land surface temperature, nice high resolution imagery, but lots of data gaps, problems with cloud cover, short coverages, other high resolution data sets also limited in different ways. So the challenge is to bring all these data sets together to produce a time and space consistent, coherent, high resolution heat hazard map to develop these exposure indicators. We can see the different cities are very different. This was intentional to have these two very different cities. Again, I'm not going to dive into the details here, but this is looking at the relationships between these different data sets. How well do they agree in estimating heat across the cities? And we can see that those relationships look very different. Abidjan in a coastal tropical location, much higher humidity. Johannesburg, relatively high elevation, much drier subtropical. And so we really have to develop models that are context specific to make sure we're really representing heat exposure. This is a really fun little study we did, not little, but quite comprehensive study, but quite a short period, where we developed a synthetic cohort of patients. So these are imaginary patients that conveniently are located right next to weather stations, so we can do this analysis, just to look at what impact it would have if we use different estimates of land surface temperature to develop exposures. And we can conclude that it makes a big difference. So really the conclusion from this slide is we do have to do this modeling. We have to get it right, and we have to do it in an integrated way. Last little bit, we're also looking at using high resolution dynamical modeling, again, not to represent the long time period heat exposure, but to contribute to the statistical machine learning models. We can combine dynamical modeling with machine learning models. And here's just some evidence that the dynamical model in the slides in the middle there, or the plots in the middle, better represents what we see from satellite observations of land surface temperature on the bottom right from HE2AT, compared to the big global low resolution temperature products that we might use normally. So the dynamical modeling contributing and being integrated into the machine learning to develop these heat hazard maps. I can't talk about all the other work. Really nice work going on at IBM Research Africa and with SESHA and UPGC in Côte d'Ivoire, looking at vulnerability mapping in the cities, looking at using generative AI models to estimate urban heat island, all very complementary and really interesting work. Some nice papers that have come out, of course, the protocol papers, and then some really useful systematic reviews emerging that are informing a lot of the work. And again, a large number of people involved behind all of this. I also just want to mention, I think about 1 second left, a lot of other engagement going on around capacity building with the student cohorts, stakeholder engagement. We've just had a really successful workshop in Abidjan. With a lot of various from people outside of the project. So that's a whole other side, the engagement side that I am not presenting any slides on, but is really, really important and developing really well. And this was meant to be an animation, but I turned it into a PDF. This is just a generative AI model trying to estimate urban heat exposure across the city of Johannesburg. So thank you. That was quick, very fast. So I hope we got something out of that.
Very good. Chris, there's a couple of short questions in the chat. One is about health outcomes that you're measuring.
Great, yeah. Shall I answer in the chat or while we carry on, or what should we do?
You could, if you want to answer that one, and then maybe the rest of them we should do the chat to move on. Yeah.
So yeah, thanks, Dan. So the health outcomes are different for RP1 and RP2. So RP1 is very focused, as I mentioned, on maternal and childhood health, and the primary focus there is preterm birth as the health outcome of interest. RP2, that's developing as we go. So there we much more kind of hypothesis generating. We're looking at things like renal function, interactions with cardiovascular and respiratory conditions. But there we want to kind of explore what the data reveals around the health outcomes. There's some obviously from the literature that we expect to see, particularly around renal function. But I might also hand over to some of my more medical colleagues here who are more engaged with a lot of this work. Yeah. How did you ensure the synthetic data is? Yeah, Mary, I'll answer that one in the chat because it might need a bit of back and forwards. So.
Right. Okay. All right.
Thanks.
Yeah. We'll go ahead and move on then. So now we're going to move to a number of the different pilot projects. And I think Liberty Makacha is next. And I think we're doing the pre-recording for that one. Is that correct, Liberty?
Yep, it's correct. You can use the pre-recording.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
My name is Liberty Makacha. I am a senior research scientist in the Place Alert Labs at Midland State University in Zimbabwe. And I'm also a final year PhD student looking at the interplay between air quality and pregnancy outcomes in 3 sub-Saharan African settings. My email address is as below. For the HE2AT project, which I'm going to be talking about today, we are looking at methods to extrapolating exposures in 3 African countries, which is Mozambique, Kenya, and the Gambia. And HE2AT is an acronym which stands for Extrapolating Temperature and Air Quality Exposure in Space and Time. And this is a new spatial data science approach integrating land use metrics and deep learning models. So the aim of HE2AT is to actively contribute methodologically to the development of comprehensive exposure surfaces that closely align with real-world environmental interplays. This is a project which is being implemented in partnership with King's College London, Imperial College London, the Midland State University, where I am domiciled in Zimbabwe, as well as WITS or HI, which is currently funding this project. The objectives of the project are to quantify individual and community level risk of exposure to temperature and air pollution in 3 sub-Saharan African countries. Secondly, we will design space-time sensitive models of exposure that accurately extrapolate heat and temperature exposures based on key exposure determinants in different micro and macro environments. And finally, we will calibrate these models of exposure extrapolation. We envision that Africa being generally data poor, which has greatly hindered informed place-specific interventions, that HE2AT will contribute behavior, location, and time-sensitive methodologies to extrapolating exposure surfaces in data poor settings. First, with a limited data scenario, but with the exposure context from the precise study. What do we do so that we can still understand the link between environmental exposures and health endpoints? So from background literature that we've done, literature review that we've done, we now know several factors that modify heat and air pollution exposure in African or limited resource settings generally. And we've gone on to now collect data on the precise study which speaks to most of these variables. And to date, we now have 74 variables collected into a central location. Most of these datasets are either GIS datasets or socio-demographic data that speaks to modifiers of exposure. And based on the precise study, we now know that generally there is a mid to late afternoon peak in exposure in all the study sites under investigation. However, Kenya and the Gambia seem to be also associated with morning peak exposures as compared to Mozambique. In Kenya, decay rates for peak morning exposures are low, indicating the influence of more localized sources of air pollution in homesteads. Some months are generally associated with higher exposures than others, and this is potentially a behavior or regional exposure function. And looking at the ambient exposure scenario, low to midday ambient air pollution measurements, low midday ambient air pollution measurements, and this could be a function of wind characteristics in the different microenvironments. We are still investigating the link between ambient measurements and wind characteristics to accurately quantify this relationship for our exposure models. So generally, you would see that from this visualization that all 3 countries are associated with a midday to early afternoon peak in exposure, and the decay rates for these exposures are also generally consistent. However, the decay rate for the morning peak in exposure and generally in all 3 countries seem to be lower than the afternoon decay rate. And on a different note, we realize that women who use wood to cook breathe 50% more pollution than charcoal and 100% more than those who use gas or kerosene. So what do these factors mean for the extrapolation models which we are developing? HE2AT will take on some of these findings to try and come up with a way of extrapolating exposures, use behavior and social demographic characteristics as identified in previous studies, linking these with GIS datasets to come up with models that could then extrapolate to wider geographies across different space-time scenarios. So what we've done to date is to identify the key risk factors that elevate risk of exposures in sub-Saharan African settings. We've done this through literature review, like like I've pointed to before, but we've also qualified these relationships through a reanalysis of the precise data set. Some of the graphics I shared earlier on speaks to some of these relationships in the data. And we've also conducted community engagement sessions in the Mozambique, Kenya, and the Gambia communities to try and explain some of the findings that we've got in our data set. All this information will be very useful in trying to understand how we then model to wider geographies. So we now know some of the key drivers of exposure severity in sub-Saharan African settings. We've now provided context to why things work, to why and how things work in different ways to drive exposures in the 3 sub-Saharan African settings. We've provided depth by exploring how risk factors manifest in specific microenvironments, offering more granular insights into exposure dynamics. And when we've gone on to data pool, clean, and collect most of the variables which we think are useful for the exposure extrapolation models which we are going to develop. Environmental exposure metrics from satellite imagery have also been gathered and are currently being processed for the extrapolation models. Going forward, we are going to conduct what we call feature importance ranking to try and identify some of the variables we think speak more to exposure modification than others. And after that stage, we will then iteratively develop models of extrapolating exposures. And we're going to fit these models and also do some sensitivity analysis to evaluate the extent or the best fit models for different case scenarios. And we are hoping that at some point along the way, we will also try to disseminate widely our findings to solicit varied opinions into the models. Thank you so much for listening into this presentation. I invite questions or clarifications, if any, or suggestions as to what else we could potentially incorporate into this kind of work. We are looking for collaborators, especially those from a spatial sciences background who will be willing to work with us in this kind of work. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think in the interest of time, just to make sure we get through all the presentations, please put your questions for Liberty in the chat, and Liberty, if you can answer them there. And then, so our next presentation for another pilot project is Elvis Achiri, and that's also recorded.
Hello and welcome to this session. I am Achiri Elvis Ndikum, Principal Investigator of the HE2AT Center Pilot Project, a retrospective study of the association between temperature, relative humidity by season on cardiopulmonary emergency hospital admissions in Cameroon. This study came as a follow-up to a previous study we conducted, now published in the Global Asthma Report, showing the prevalence and severity of asthma in relation to environmental risk factors, and our engagement with diverse stakeholders, including the World Organization of Family Doctors, the World Heart Federation, the Global Asthma Network, thanks to funding from the HE2AT Center, bringing this collaboration with experts. I want to acknowledge during this presentation, we have been able to build this project that I'll be presenting how it has been going on and our key findings from the study. the background and rationale. Global mean temperatures have risen markedly in the last century in large measure as a result of human activities that emit greenhouse gases. Climate change should disproportionately affect susceptible populations, as you will know, children, elderly people, and those with pre-existing condition. High temperatures adversely affect the cardiopulmonary systems and associated with increased wheezing in both asthmatic and non-asthmatic children. Yet there is lack of data in Cameroon, Africa on the impact mitigation and adaptation actions needed to address climate change related heat. The aim and methods for our study. The aim of this study was to determine the association between seasonal temperature, relative humidity, and rainfall on emergency hospitalization for serious respiratory and cardiovascular diseases in Yaoundé, Cameroon from 2019 to 2021. Mapping key stakeholders and identifying potential champions was important. We obtained ethical clearance and collected data from 3 major hospital records, the Yaoundé Teaching Hospital, Jamon Hospital, and the Chantabia Foundation Hospital. We engaged with National Meteorology Agency to collect daily records on climate variables at 7 stations. Our time series study was analyzed using a nonlinear exposure response relationships between mean temperature and diurnal and daily hospital admission due to respiratory conditions were modeled with negative binomial regression in the distributed lag nonlinear modeling framework and associated with a Poisson regression for cardiovascular cases. The spatiotemporal variation in mean maximum temperature was varying with a significant increase in the north of Yaoundé, especially in 2019, showing more heat than 2020 and 2021. And this trend continued for minimum temperature variations with the north still being hot, but 2019 and 2020 being hotter than 2021. Being colder, than 2021. As you can see, 2019 and 2020 were colder. As you can see the sections, it shows that 2021 was warmer. From our results, we had key results that showed we had a total of 7,947 hospitalizations, where from the 3 hospitals from 2019 to 2021, with 91.2%, that is 7,247 attributed to respiratory conditions. And this one thing which was interesting was seeing the peak in 2021, which could be attributed to COVID-19, because Jamon Hospital had most of our patients as a referral hospital for respiratory issues, and COVID-19 patients came there very much. For the daily temperature and relative humidity range from 19.9 and degrees Celsius and 48 to 99% respectively. Both climate variables displayed a seasonal trend, as you can see. Cumulative association between mean temperature and hospital admissions, as we can see from 0 to 21-day lag, showed that the highest risk of hospitalization was at 22 degrees Celsius, and admissions decreased at below 22 degrees Celsius and 23, and the risk of hospitalization was low for all lag days. As we can see, for all lag days, the risk was low. The relationship between diurnal temperature range displayed an S shape with positive association between 4 degrees and 6 degrees Celsius, and negative association between 8 and 10 degrees Celsius. High risk of 13 at 13 degrees. High diurnal temperature had a significant immediate effect on hospitalization, which continued to the 7-day lag, as we can see. And one thing which is interesting, we have observed just the respiratory results, but the cardiovascular results will be published in a manuscript. And this study, we want to continue collecting data for 2021 to 2023 to really see the peak trends, the change due to COVID in 2021 for our study, how it impacted hospitalization, and if the significant risks for HEAT not being there at the moment was only due to COVID or the climatic conditions in Yaoundé. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask out loud? We might have time just for one or two. If not, we can move on, and feel free to keep commenting in the chat. It looks like we have some nice conversations and some collaborations being set up, which is great, kind of the whole point of this. So the next one is Dr. Adijan, and I think this one is also pre-recorded. Thank you.
So good day. It's a pleasure to be part of this networking event, to see and engage virtually. And here we're presenting our work on assessing intra-urban HE2AT vulnerabilities in Lagos. So we're looking at differences between HE2AT issues in formal areas and informal areas, and we're three on the team, so I'm speaking for our team. Our project is one of the pilot projects in the HE2AT Center at VITS RHI. So in our work, we actually have 4 work packages. So you could say 4 objectives. So the first one is to do local climate zone classification and mapping. And the second objective, which is also linked to the third, is to do it as an assessment and to do HE2AT relationships, HE2AT vulnerabilities. So the fourth work package and objective is to collect primary data that helps to validate what we have earlier. And in this case, we're using 2 main means, micrometeorological monitoring. So we are monitoring for a year, and we've deployed HEAT sensors indoor, outdoor, across the 3 areas where we are working. So I should not forget to say we are working in 3 communities in Lagos. So one is a formal neighborhood, the other 2 are informal neighborhood, heterogeneous, different from the 2 are actually different. So we also had this HE2AT survey, which we deployed a web-based questionnaire, which we collected data on housing characteristics, on heat perception, health experiences, adaptation measures, and a couple of other aspects across the 3 areas. So we did it across 2 seasons to reflect the seasonal issues. So we had the wet season last year, July, August, and the dry season survey early this year in February, March. That's at the peak of the dry season, the hot season. So we engaged over 5,000 respondents across the surveys and over 2,000 households across the survey. So I'm just going to present a snapshot of our results. For the first work package, we did the local climate zone classification following the HE2AT urban climate patterns, 17 of them in terms of built areas and in terms of land cover. And the key takeaway here is that the slum areas fall into the hot parts, the hotter climate zones. So we also went further to understand the critical heat risk zones. So in this case, we worked with land surface temperature data, LST, and then humidex data. So we were able to identify the critical heat risk zones in the city, and some of the informal settlement fall within these areas. So bringing this together, the key issue we found is that the slum areas have significant heat exposure in a way compared to the other parts of the city. So coming to the survey, we actually part of what we checked was the heat perception, indoor heat perception in the daytime, indoor heat perception at the night time. So the map you can see here is for indoor heat perception in the wet season versus the dry season. So the wet season is what we call the baseline period, and then the dry season is what we call the hot season. So you can see that even across the two informal settlements, one settlement felt cooler than the other. So Ajegule, which is one of the informal settlements, felt cooler compared to Ebute-Elaje, and this could be linked to a couple of issues: proximity to, in terms of humidity, in terms of housing materials, in terms of land cover in these spaces. So we were able to establish this difference. Part of the survey also captured illnesses experienced. We also looked at health-seeking behavior in terms of heat exposure. So the major physiological problem here is malaria, which is quite common in this part of the world anyway. We also found things like tiredness, dehydration, headache, reduced ability to walk, and a couple of other health challenges like skin rashes, high blood pressure, nausea, muscle cramps. So we analyzed some of the results and found the significant role of housing characteristics in heat exposure, in terms of the roof type, in terms of the wall materials, and other characteristics of the dwelling. So we also found that heat exposure is significant in terms of malaria, and also positive association between heat exposure and high blood pressure and skin rashes. And some of these things are what logic could also suggest. In terms of the heat monitoring, we have this data for the first 2 months of our monitoring to show the high level of exposure, especially in the informal areas, indoor exposure, which could be linked to a couple of factors, things like overcrowding, things like activities that shouldn't be done indoors, things like cooking. So there is a high level of heat exposure indoor in some of these areas. So our motivation was to understand diversity in heat health experiences across the city, particularly what solution could work for the African urban context, which is characteristically informal. And this is still on our minds. Our results speak to some of this, but we look forward to partnerships, we look forward to collaborations that helps us to address some of these questions, from scholars, policy actors, communication experts across disciplines, particularly also bringing in the social and humanities dimension to our work. We look forward to interest in getting this and others done. So these are our contacts, the three investigators on the project, and we look forward to connecting with you. So thank you.
Okay, that was great. Anybody want to ask any questions out loud for that one? Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. The last speaker was it particularly piqued my interest because of the issue of the role the public health plays.
Sorry, I think we lost your audio. Okay, maybe if you can go ahead and put your question in the chat. I think we'll go ahead and move on unless there's anybody else. Okay, if not, we have one more pilot project from Iba Dele. And I think this one might be live. We don't have this one pre-recorded, I don't believe.
Hello,
Yes.
I'm Ibadeli.
Yeah, did you want to do it
Can
live?
can I share my screen?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to present our pilot project. The subject we are implementing is social media and public perception of it in the city of Abidjan. Mm. Hello.
Yeah, we can see them. They're not in full screen mode, but we can see it okay that way.
Can I see my screen? Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Okay. The main objective is to understand the perception of it by the population of Abidjan through the frequencies and effect reported in social media. We have four specific objectives. The one objective is to analyze social media data between 2014 and 2024. The second is analyze climate data evolution in Abidjan from 2014 to 2024. And the cost analysis of the result of objective 1 and objective 2. The last objective is to validate the result of objective 3 through the field survey and group discussion. Our methodological approach is based on definition of keyword, social media selection, extracting social media data, using temperature data from Sodexam, household survey on heat perception, discussion workshop between key population and community members in Abidjan. Activity carry out. Project learn workshop, obtaining ethical clearance, stakeholder engagement, field survey completed, and temperature data extraction. The next step is processing of survey data, climate data processing, and social media data extraction. Expected result. At the end of this project, the perception of it by the population of Abidjan are known. Its sensibility threshold of the population in Abidjan are known. The study will help to achieve one of the objectives of the RP2. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you. So we have maybe a few minutes remaining before we'll be going back to the regular room. So the floor is kind of open to any questions or comments on really any of the talks. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I kind of lost connection a few minutes ago. So my question is directed to the last speaker. So I was going to ask him, I'm happy he has included something for them to do relating to public health. But public health is a very broad field. So I was just wondering, is there any particular sector of public health he's interested in, since he has identified malaria as a problem in that study area? Thank you.
Hello?
Yep, we hear you.
Yes, I guess that question was directed to me. Thanks, Abiba, for the comment. Well, our team doesn't include public health experts, but we believe the preventive dimensions of public health is important because if we can identify the links between it and malaria occurrence, and the approach is to see how to prevent this. So we expect to see preventive dimensions from awareness to initiatives that could reduce exposure to it and reduce incidences of malaria. I think what we've found from our exchange with public health experts has been that with increasing temperature, the breeding of it makes breeding of mosquitoes easier. The law of higher temperatures. I mean, that's just the logic. So how to reduce the heat and how to also reduce exposure to these vectors. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, and if you look forward to we look forward to collaborating. If you have some interest, we have our contacts. I also put my contacts on the chat box, and you can reach out. We can take it further.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll do that.
Okay, other questions or comments? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. My question is directed to the last speaker. Such an interesting project. I don't know much about that, but can I join the project so as to learn? Thank you. I don't know if you got my question.
Yeah, I don't know if Eva wants to comment.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead. We hear you.
Can you repeat, please?
Sorry, I said I like your project. I'm interested in learning how to use social media data to arrive at such conclusion. Can I please join your team?
Yes.
So then,
Yes. Yes. Uh, I will give you my contact.
oh, that'll be fine.
Okay, it looks like we're about to close down. And I think most of the other questions were answered in the chat. So I just want to thank all the speakers and everyone else for participating. And I think this was all these projects were amazing pilot projects, and this HEAT Research Hub has done some amazing work, and we're really looking forward to hopefully a lot of new collaborations that are going to come out of this exchange. So thanks, everyone.